is going to be actively involved in supporting this initiative. Now, in line with this youth empowerment program, we have already started giving substantial support to the national service program, especially in the agricultural sector. So, ladies and gentlemen, these are just a few areas that EDIF is engaged in, which we believe can serve as a platform for us to join hands with foreign investors to help in the development of our country. And I'm going to conclude very briefly to say that EDIF is very, very well organized. We have recently have a full board inaugurated, and we have a very, very dynamic leadership in the Ministry of Trade and Industries. And we are very, very well organized to deliver on the mandate that the people of Ghana deserve from us. At the Secretariat, we have now simplified all our application procedures to reduce time and open ourselves more for engagement with other partner agencies. We have also are trying to bring our services closer to our clients. As some of you might know, we have an office in Tamale. We have opened another office in Kumasi, which will be functional very soon. And we are hoping in the very near future to have representation in all the regional capitals of the country, so that anybody who wishes to engage EDIF will not have to travel far to be able to get the services that they require. So, let me say again that we are open for business. Our doors are wide open, and we look forward to welcoming you to our premises and discussing possible partnerships that can enable us move this country forward as we all would like to. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bafo Osei. Very good to hear what's happening about the youth as well in our country. And I think the most exciting thing, if you remember anything at all that he said, is the doors of Ghana are wide open. And this is not just for the monies to come in, this is for part of the objectives of FDI, which is for the savoir-faire, the technical know-how, the best practices, the shared learning. This is what we're looking for, as well as the interaction. So we're moving on now, and we would like to hear from somebody who is well-versed with what's happening on the other side of the world, like I said, one of the first world countries, which is the United States of America. And as I spoke earlier on about the Vice President of the Corporate Council on Africa, and that's Ambassador Robert C. Perry, he will be speaking to us shortly on what happens with the U.S. Corporate Council on Africa and how Ghana can be highly involved in ensuring there is FDI coming in. After that, we will be hearing a brief overview from the Minister of Finance and Economic Planning. He will be speaking to us clearly at 2:30 in the afternoon, later on in the second session. And a lot of what Dr. Bafo Osei said, I had so many questions I wanted to ask about which type of investment, what type. I know we have the big oil and gas. I'm sure, do we have anybody from oil and gas here? And the mining sectors, the banking sectors. But then we have the nitty-gritties and the smaller sectors. We can invest in florists, we can invest in wood, in agriculture. And that's what we're looking for, all aspects for Ghana. And so we've got a lot happening, and in the first session we will be breaking all this down, as well as listening and trying to break down the speech which will be ably given by for the President of Ghana, and that's also something that we'll be addressing in the first session. And so we move on to speak with Ambassador Perry, who's going to come and speak to us about foreign investment.
Honorable Minister of Finance and Economic Planning, Honorable Chair of the panel, other distinguished members of the panel, members of the Diplomatic Corps, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It's my honor today to bring you a warm welcome from Steve Hayes, President of the Corporate Council on Africa in Washington, D.C. CCA, as we are known, we're a membership organization of about 180 companies, primarily American companies, but not only American companies. We have invited African companies to join CCA during the past year, and the goal is a practical one, to stimulate partnerships between American companies and African companies to do business in Africa. This is the second trade mission that I've brought to Ghana in 2 years. The first one was in February 2012, focused on the power sector. This time our group is more diverse, covering ICT, housing, agribusiness, internet. And so we're looking at opportunities here over a broader spectrum. And there's a reason for that, because we see the economic potential for doing business in Ghana. We know that there are strong companies here that American companies can partner with. And Ghana has demonstrated through economic planning that it is creating an environment to attract investment globally. Ghana has benefited over the last 5 to 8 years from several things to stimulate its economy. First, I would say its own economic planning. Secondly, the dramatic growth of the Chinese economy, which has drawn natural resources globally, and that has lifted the natural resource exports of Ghana, along with that of many other countries around the world. And also the global recovery from the recession of 2007-2008. So all of that has allowed Ghana to grow in the last 4 to 5 years. However, I think there was some drop-off in 2013, which I think presents an opportunity for reflection in terms of what are the types of policies and strategies that should be adopted going forward. Ghana's economic policy for growth is based upon strong participation and involvement of the private sector. So it's worthwhile thinking about what attracts private sector investment to Ghana or to any other country. Same thing applies to the United States. So and it applies both to domestic investors as well as foreign investors. I think many of us know that if a country does not have good economic policies, not only does it have to worry about the lack of foreign investment, it has to worry about its own domestic capital going elsewhere to seek a better return. Some of the things that investors look for, I would suggest 4 points, and I'll elaborate just a little bit. A clear and durable political commitment to private sector investment. Regulation that is transparent, reasonable, and speedy in execution. Transparent procurement processes and talented workforces. The key part of Ghana's development is based on infrastructure development. Infrastructure investment generally is an investment that can extend over several decades for a company that's operating, whether it's oil and gas, mining, or whatever. A company, in making that investment, looks at the political climate in the country in terms of policy making towards power and investment, broad-based as well as sectoral. If the policy environment is clear, it lowers political risk, reduces the need for political risk insurance, and lowers the cost of that investment to the investor. If the political commitment is ambiguous, it raises the political risk, increases the cost of political risk insurance, raises questions about the investment, and makes it a more expensive investment, lowering rates of return, and possibly causing the investor to think twice about doing it at all. And I'll say again, this applies to domestic and foreign investors. Secondly, regulation is transparent, reasonable, and speedy. The private sector understands that regulation is both necessary and important. It's necessary to provide a level playing field, to provide a secure working environment, a safe working environment, to address environmental risk, environmental degradation, and setting in place policies that all investors work to minimize that or to mitigate it when it occurs. Transparent procurement policies by government are also important. In OECD countries, government procurement might represent anywhere from 13 to maybe up to 20% of GDP. In developing nations, however, it can reach in the 50 to 70% range. So it is important that a government have clear policies there and be transparent, and that companies understand what to expect when they enter into a procurement process, so that they stay involved and make the investment, and that then there is a cycle, a virtuous cycle, that when some companies do well in government procurement, others see what is possible and others follow. One of our former secretaries of state said at one point, Colin Powell, capital is a coward. It looks for safety and predictability. Another little aphorism that you might keep in mind is time is money in making an investment. Investment decisions that can be made environment clear, let's say in a one-year period, are much better than those where factors involved making an investment might extend out 2 to 3 years. So government decision-making that fosters a quick decision-making process attracts more investment, both the initial one and others that follow. Other key point is a talented workforce. That gets at the issue that is one in Ghana as well as in many other countries, including the United States, and that is local content. To make local content successful, you need a clear policy, a discussion that comes out of a discussion amongst many stakeholders that involves both the government, the universities, corporations, labor unions, everyone that is involved, so that you set out clear goals that are feasible in terms of implementation, to be sure that 5 years into a policy, all the stakeholders can see that there is success in meeting the objectives that have been mutually agreed upon. When you get that sort of reinforcing success, those who were skeptical at first understand the benefits of it going forward. If you don't have that, then there's frustration that sets in. Foreign investors in particular have many options in making their investment, and they're generally bringing in more capital and higher technology into developing economies. They need those increased, higher skilled labor force that is necessary. Make reference to the company in Malaysia in terms of electrical engineers. Smaller companies there having many more that exist in Ghana. Finding the appropriate model to attract and to educate Ghanaians to meet the needs of both Ghanaian companies as well as foreign companies coming here. So that means there has to be a dialogue between university leaders and business leaders, and identifying the skills, providing the financial resources to train the students to be able to fill the positions being created with foreign investment. If that is done, I think you will see in 5 to 10 years, Ghana not only will stay at where it is, it will go much beyond where it has been. And that is the opportunity for Ghana and the opportunity for all of us here who are friends of Ghana to work with it in its own development for everyone's benefit. Thank you very much.
Gary, thank you very much. Just looking at our time, we're going to move on very quickly. I'd just like to do 1 or 2 introductions. We have a lot of dignitaries here with us. Throughout the day, we're going to be introducing people so that we're all aware who you have to go and make a beeline for and target that person during the coffee break. And more important than these sessions, I can assure you. That's where we need to speak to people. I would like to introduce very quickly the Honorable Minister of Tourism, Culture and the Creative Arts, Madame Elizabeth Ofosu Ajare. She's with us on the high table. Very important industry when it comes to pulling in foreign direct investments. We're really glad to have her here with us today. There is somebody that I'd also like to introduce, and he will be speaking to us shortly. And he is in the person of the Member of Parliament for the Ododo, love that word, constituency. He's the Deputy Minister of Trade and Investment, Sir Nilande van der Poy. He's with us today. Thank you very much for coming. He's going to be addressing us shortly, and we'll be hearing from him. And so very quickly, like I said earlier on, the Honourable Minister of Finance is going to give us an overview of what the economy is like, what Ghana is like, what investment is, and then he will be taking us much deeper, drilling down further at 2:30 in the afternoon.
Thank you very much. For staff, colleague ministers, members of the call, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I am required to speak to the outlook as the theme of the conference itself states quite clearly. In terms of the outlook for Ghana, we like to say that Ghana is a country in transition. A transition that was marked in 2010 by the rebasing of our GDP and, in short order, the onset of the oil and gas industry becoming commercial. The one thing that has marked Ghana since then, despite the population census that shows that we have a larger number of people, is the fact that Ghana has become a lower middle income country. And a few months back, another thing that we cemented that lower middle income status was a very benign email that suggested that at the negotiation of the World Bank, we could no longer negotiate for 40-year loans, but we have to negotiate for 25-year loans. A few weeks later, I got a similar notification from the African Development Bank. And therefore, in terms of the outlook, Ghana is also a country that should prepare for this new status. I respond to those who had a remark and say, why do we have to bring this onto ourselves? And I said, we are not bringing it onto ourselves. It is a reality that has gone, and we must adopt strategies that make it important for us not to suffer the reversal which countries had when they become middle-income countries. It is in this context that I like to also place or inform the audience about Africa's relatively prominent role in Davos this year. Clearly, the global community recognizes that there is a renaissance of some form of emergence in Africa, despite volatility that we see, which in the past would have distracted many people from Africa. Because in the past, similar volatilities as we see today in the global economy would have been a deterrent for an Africa that depended almost exclusively on primary commodities and indeed continues to produce. We have just been told about Africa's place in the BRICS and in the MINT, and I believe there is also talk of some lines of Africa which is speaking about or comparing it to the targets that made Asia what it is. I must say with firm conviction that the prospects for Ghana in this context are bright. On the outlook, in looking either at the macroeconomy or sectors, point to a stable and bright future in the country. I say so because despite the difficulties we had in power point was made about 2013, being probably some outlier. The economic growth grew at a respectable 7%. Power is restored, and we do have our own program for bringing gas and stream to cement, but to make sure that we minimize the volatility that comes to the economy, particularly for the private sector, anytime we have difficulties. Also know that recently, the West Africa gas pipeline suffering some setback as a result of the breach of the pipeline in Nigeria. In this year's budget, we laid out two important policies on the government side. First, we announced that we would be embarking on a new debt strategy that would make it less constraining for the private sector and the government to pursue its goal of infrastructure development. The concept is simple, though we do not anticipate that the implementation will necessarily be simple. It is that in the past, anytime government has supported infrastructure development, in whatever form, whether it's guarantee or direct loan, with its own length, and even when institutions, as I said, recently like BRE, has finished, has serviced over 1.8 billion of loan that has been given to it since that was only down. These loans continue to be counted as public debt, and they may have in our public debt to GDP ratio. We want to demonstrate that we have institutions and we have projects that can follow the self-financing model and do not necessarily have to be supported in every instance by government. It is in this regard that we are having discussions with the World Bank, as well as African Development Bank, and other institutions with respect to superior instruments like partial risk and credit risk guarantees, which have been used recently in Nigeria and in Kenya to support infrastructure development. We are in discussion with other institutions like USSD. We see positive response coming, and this is a policy which we definitely want to pursue with the support of these multilateral institutions. We also announced the establishment of an infra fund, which initially will leverage our flows of petroleum revenue, as you know, we have the Petroleum Revenue Management Act, into to leverage the markets for further investments. This infrastructure fund will establish fully, will also mobilize resources, pension funds, and seek its own rating in order to mobilize resources for special purpose vehicles, joint venture vehicles for further promotion of our infrastructure development. This is the way forward for Ghana as a lower middle income country. This is the way forward for Ghana to realize the huge potential that we have, particularly for commercial projects that do not necessarily have to be developed only with government guarantees. Let me also quickly mention the fact that in looking forward, we are seeking to manage our volatilities better. Our volatilities used to be one of only commodity prices. And more recently, as we have seen, Ghana as a peripheral country, peripheral to the emerging countries, is impacted, as many African countries, by even what would have been remote in market terms, the tapering in the US. And we experienced this firsthand when we issued our second sovereign bond just around the time when the US Fed was announcing a change in tapering policy. It affected the yields which we had to go to the market. Therefore, in looking forward, we acknowledge these volatilities as real, and it is important that we have both the necessary foreign exchange, the necessary financial and other tools to be able to manage them better as the emerging and developed countries do. Again, by discussions on these matters. It is important that we have an integrated, we have real sector and service sectors that promotes the future outlook for Ghana. We should not be dependent only on oil and gas, for example. What characterizes Ghana's economy today is a diversified economy. Few people who refer to Ghana as a country with natural resource-rich country often overlook that the largest sector of the economy is actually the service sector. It's not natural resources. Although we anticipate that natural resources will contribute. Therefore, with a robust agricultural policy sector led by Kuku for a very long time, we expect to continue to have a diversified economy as a way of also a fair distribution. We expect to have more value addition because that is the only way in which we can move away from our experience with commodities such as gold and bauxite manganese that used to be exported on a raw form. This is the context of the gas processing plant, for example, which makes it possible for us in future not to flare or reinject gas. Let me end my brief remarks on an institutional note. And Colin Powell was just quoted. I wish to also quote President Obama when he visited Ghana, and he said, what we need most are institutions. We indeed came to see a strong banking sector and a strong insurance sector. And we welcome the presence of some giants in this sector, global giants, who are opening offices in Ghana. We say the environment is welcoming, and we expect that they will stay, and government will do everything possible to make sure that we have a deeper financial and insurance market. The EDIF presentation itself pointed to what we are doing with the SME sector. I'd like to also say that, as I discussed with my colleague Minister for Trade and Industry, it is in synergies that we can help the SME sector. It's in synergies such as taking the power of EDIF, combining it with our venture capital, which is target resources, combining it with our exim guarantee, in order that we do not